Hello, my name is Tim Lawrence. I'm the Edexcel Psychology Subject Advisor, and this video is to share the first half of the presentation which we delivered early in October as our exam feedback for A-Level Psychology Paper 3 from the summer series of 2023. So we're going to be looking at some other questions in the sort of part 2 video, which is in the same playlist, and you can also find feedback videos there for papers 1 and paper 2. Now, in this presentation, we're going to look at some general feedback from the principal examiner on the paper as a whole. And we're going to look at two questions in detail, looking at some exemplar responses and discussing the marks that they were awarded, the 6 marker and the 16 marker. And we'll look at the 12 marker and the 20 marker in the other video. So you can download these responses if you'd like to pause the video and read them and consider the mark that you would give them, along with mark schemes through links in the description of this video. Or you can hopefully pause and view them on the screen if you would prefer to do that. So moving on to look at the overview of the paper. This was, of course, only the second full exam series since COVID-19 stops normal exams from happening, and the first one since then with no advance information. So it's the back to normal exam series. And in section A, the best responses gave contextualized answers that were really specific to the novel scenario provided in the question. For example, where a question asked for one strength, weakness, or improvement for 2 marks, the stronger candidates provided a full justification of their relevant identified point in relation to the study, whereas the weaker responses were either not fully justified or they were just purely generic, which is a kind of common issue. So that's the key difference there. For section B, the best responses focused on considering relevant and appropriate points related to the unseen study, question 3, and on the required imbalance for the essay, question 4. So the imbalance the examiner is referring to here means that in the 16 marker, there's only 6 marks available for AO1. So in contrast to those 8 mark questions where they need to be writing an equal amount of AO1 and AO2 or AO1 and AO3, excuse me, in a 16 mark question, they need to write more evaluation. They need to go into greater depth. So that's a key distinguishing feature of the stronger responses, that they did that. Points were accurate in the stronger responses, and in the context of the question, focused on producing relevant and appropriate material, showing clear understanding of what they were asked in the questions. So it's a very general piece of exam technique advice for students, but examiners always say this: they want them to really read and think about the question and not give generic responses, but actually tailor what they know to answer. In relation to section C, the best responses considered the balance for question 5 or imbalance for question 6 required for the command words and question types used. Knowledge and understanding, AO1, was relevant, accurate, and thorough, with varied ideas used as appropriate. Evaluation, analysis, and assessment, AO3, was well developed and led to appropriate judgments and conclusions throughout their response. So that's what the examiners are looking for. And the balance there was again related to the AO1, AO2, AO3 in the 12 marker, which we'll look at in the part 2 video. Okay, so moving on then to look at the first of our questions, which we're going into in detail, question 3B. It's an unusual question type. It's the only 6 marker on the paper, and we've got a question here where they've got some novel information about an anti-littering study. Up to 3 marks out of the 6 are for application of learning theories to the findings of the study. The question is, using research evidence, explain how far learning theories could account for the findings of the anti-littering study. So 3 marks for application of learning theories there, and up to 3 marks for judgment, justification of the research evidence. So similar to other explain questions where marks are often awarded in couplets of 2, one for identifying, another for justifying or exemplifying. Candidates who did well gave clear, accurate application of learning theories to the findings of the study and then provided evidence supporting or refuting their ideas. Candidates who did not do well did not offer any AO3 and had limited AO2 application. So I think that's a really important bit of feedback, not just for the 6-mark question, but for any explain question. It's recognizing that there's two things being looked for, and the hardest skill is explaining why something might apply or be a strength or whatever is being asked for. Okay, so we've got candidate response 1 here, and I think for each of these questions we've got 3 different candidate responses. So there's plenty of reading and marking for you to do. Pause if you'd like to read this on screen or through the download link. Okay, so we've got some highlighting here, and I'll just quickly talk you through what this shows. So here, the examiner has highlighted for us in purple where AO2 credit is being given. And if there was AO3, then that would be highlighted in blue, but there isn't any. So this response only contains AO2 skill. Application of SLT to the findings in terms of role models is there. Application of operant conditioning in terms of positive punishment to the findings of the study. And there's application of operant conditioning in terms of positive reinforcement as well. But there's no AO2 credit for SLT at the end, as there's only 3 marks available for AO2. So they've gone kind of beyond the requirement, but they've not given any AO3 content, no justification. So the mark awarded there is 3 out of 6, like full marks for AO2, but no AO3. Okay, so let's have a look at candidate response 2. And once again, pause now if you don't want any spoiler. And I will then go through the mark awarded. What did you think? Okay, so here we have blue as well as purple. So the blue is the AO3 justification, and the purple is the AO2 application. So this one was awarded 4 out of 6. So good response, but not quite into the very top of the mark scheme. AO3 for Skinner study supporting operant conditioning, only credited in support of the AO2 point that follows. If the AO2 point, the first big purple block there, if that were absent, they wouldn't get any credit for the Skinner point before it. But because the kind of link is then made, they do get the credit for the supporting evidence from Skinner. AO2 for application of operant conditioning in terms of positive reinforcement. That's the purple bit I was just talking about, which enables the credit for the point before. Then there's AO2 for application of SLT to the findings in terms of role models. No separate credit for material towards the top of page 2 regarding motivation, because it's too similar to the content that's already been credited at the bottom of page 1. So repetition there, something for candidates to be wary of. But then there is more AO3 credit for the Bandura study. Okay, we've got one more to look at for 3B. Here it is. Pause now if you would like to spend some time reading and considering that. What mark do you think for this one? Here we go. So we've got some more highlighting. Again, the AO2 content in purple, AO3 in blue. This is a 6 out of 6 response. And reassuringly, it's not hugely long. We've got application marks for SLT to the findings in terms of role models. That's backed up with AO3 for the Bandura point. Then there's more AO2, application of operant conditioning, positive reinforcement. That's supported by Skinner. Then there's AO2 for the classical conditioning and AO3 for Pavlov supporting that. So that's how to get 6 out of 6. So question 4. This is the 16-mark question, evaluate Rosenhan 1973 and Sharif et al. 1954-1961 in terms of their practical issues in design and implementation. So we've got the evaluate word here. We're looking for knowledge and understanding, 6 marks worth, but then 10 marks worth of evaluation, making judgments and drawing conclusions, which can be mini conclusions, doesn't have to be a separate conclusion paragraph at the end. And then we've got a mark scheme that looks like this. And as has already been noted in the general feedback, the stronger candidates recognized that they needed to give more AO3 than the AO1. So basically, when you're deciding the overall mark here, you decide on the level for the assessment objectives separately, but then instead of just taking the kind of straightforward average of the two as you would if it was equally weighted balance between the two, you're going to be more influenced by the level you've given the AO3 when you decide the overall mark. So here is candidate response 1, at least the first part of it. That's continued on the next page, coming up here. Pause if you don't want the spoiler. And here we have the highlighted version of the first part of the response. So we can see that we've got some good bits of AO1 and AO3. AO1 is now purple, AO3 is still blue. And then the second part of the response, there's some more of both there. So this was awarded 8 marks out of 16. I'm just finding my notes on this. So the AO1 is judged to be stronger. It's at level 3, accurate knowledge and understanding, whereas the AO3 here is judged to be level 2, some development, mostly accurate and relevant factual material, but a bit of a superficial conclusion. So starting at 7 in the middle of the mark band, moving up to 8 because the AO1 is stronger. So 8 marks, a sort of top level 2 response overall. On to question 4. Sorry, question 4, response 2. Again, pause if you'd like to read this one. That's continued on the next slide. There's the rest of response 2 to question 4. And I will now go on to give you feedback on this one. So a different approach, as you might have come across in previous training. Our examiners are clear that there's no right and wrong way to write these essays, and this separated approach sometimes works really well. Sometimes the integrated approach, where they switch between AO1 and AO3, works really well. It's up to the candidate, and they can write a top mark answer using either technique. So here we've got AO1 on the first page, then AO3. Page 3, we're back to AO1. Page 4, back to AO3. Okay, so AO1 is level 4, demonstrates accurate and thorough knowledge and understanding this time, and they've written a lot of it. So you might have expected that it was strong on the AO1. The AO3 here is not as strong, but it's still good. It's level 3. Arguments are developed using mostly coherent chains of reasoning, is the examiner feedback, leading to a conclusion being presented. There's a grasp of competing arguments, but the evaluation here is imbalanced. So somewhat confusingly, balance versus imbalance is used when we're talking about the amount of AO1 versus AO3. That should be imbalanced here, but the conclusion should be a balanced conclusion in the sense that it recognizes fairly equally the arguments on either side. So we've got level 3 for the more important AO3. So we start the kind of mark at 11, but then it moves up to 12 because the AO1 is stronger. So it's the top of level 3 on the mark scheme, 12 marks out of 16. And we've got one more response to this question. So there's the first part of response 3. Continued on the next page here. So hopefully you've paused and considered that one if you would like to. What mark would you give this? So this one is an integrated approach. You can see from the highlighting it's switching between AO1 and AO3. There's the rest of the response. The AO1 here is level 4, accurate and thorough knowledge and understanding. The AO3 is also level 4, well-developed and logical evaluation, logical chains of reasoning throughout, an awareness of competing arguments, and the balanced conclusion that gives kind of fair hearing to all of those. So this was put right at the top of the mark scheme, 16 out of 16. Okay, that's the end of this first part. Those are my contact details. In the playlist you'll find part 2, and hope that you enjoy that as well. Thanks for watching to the end of this bit.